Hello, welcome back to Mike Reads the World. Today on April 8th of 2024, many of my country folk have migrated to other cities in the path of the total solar eclipse to view it. I unfortunately was not one of those, only getting 80 to 90% from where I lived. And if you were one of those people that saw it, I am deeply envious and regret not organizing myself better to go and see it. And we'll have to probably travel internationally in the next few years to catch a total solar eclipse. But hey, it's a good excuse to travel internationally, right? So, segueing from the migration of my country folk, which I hope was very safe for all of them, season of migration to the north, a very different kind of migration. This book is by Tayeb, Salih, and it's for the country of Sudan, written in the 1960s, and it follows a narrator who went abroad and went to London and is coming for studying. He was there for 7 years. He's coming back and kind of reconnecting with his homeland. There are many, many, many books that have been written with this sort of setup, but none have been like this one. I almost don't even feel myself right now capable of putting into words how much was in this book. It really was about way more than this. You know, a lot of times with these books about people that go back to their own country, they can get very self-absorbed, very, wrapped up in how people are viewing them and so on. But the way this book does it, wow. There's this character, Mustafa Said, that our narrator runs into in his hometown and in Sudan. And this Mustafa tells him just this incredible story about how he too was in England, in London, and studied university, had relationships with many women, which led to their suicides and eventually a murder. And okay, the weird thing about spoilers with this book, it's one of those novellas that to really talk about your thoughts about it at all, you have to spoil some things about what happened. I can't really generalize it, but I think even if I tell you all the things I'm going to tell you, it's so open to interpretation. It's just one of those novellas that's really open to interpretation because it's told very, in a very literary way, very symbolically. There's just a lot of ways you can read into the symbolism of these characters. Anyway, Mustafa, and the narrator, and this might be a big hint, the narrator tells you pretty early on, like, something like Mustafa doesn't exist, and you think, is this just him being, like, metaphoric or something? There's a lot of connections in the book, mentions to the Shakespeare play of Othello, I don't know how you pronounce that, but in that play, Othello was a Moor, an African, and there is a whole story behind that. But I'll get to that as I kind of move on. So Mustafa tells our narrator this long story, and is also an economist as well, a brilliant economist, is the back of the book. I'm using it kind of as a guide to remember some of this stuff. But then Mustafa disappears. Mustafa drowns, and our narrator immediately is asking, did I just imagine this guy? He was here like speaking English, telling me all this stuff, and you as the reader are right away kind of asking the same thing, like, what happened to Mustafa? Let's keep reading and find out. So don't get your hopes up that the story is going to tie up all the loose ends, though, because we get, it's a story kind of just full of, and I feel like this is something I was going to save for later in the video, but Mustafa, to me, is actually a mirror for a reflection. The story that Mustafa tells our narrator is a reflection of everything else that happens to the narrator in his hometown. Mustafa's widow is under the narrator's charge, and his two kids. And and there's some certain things that happen with people in the village. Like there's a woman who's had I think seven different husbands that have died, and Mustafa was responsible allegedly for the deaths of many women in London. And so there's just all these mirror reflections of the things that are happening in Mustafa's hometown and no, sorry, not Mustafa's hometown, the narrator's hometown, and the story that Mustafa told our narrator. So the way I understand this book is like you have the story of what's really happening in the hometown, and then you have this sort of character that's only in the head of the main character that represents this idealized or fictional version of it represents a lot of things, like the ideas that Westerners or Europeans have about Orientalism, or people from Africa, Arab Africa, as is the complicated nature of Sudan, right? It's not quite Arab and it's not quite African. It's a mixture of both, and that too is in the character of Othello from Shakespeare. I'm really sorry I don't know the pronunciation of that. But see, when I got to those parts about Othello, I used this Essential Shakespeare Handbook, which I've never told this origin story, but briefly my dad owned a bookstore when I was younger, a small bookstore, and sometimes he'd get these advanced uncorrected proofs. So that's why it was never for sale, but this has got to be like 20 years old. So I don't know if this DK Essential Shakespeare Handbook is still like floating out there somewhere. But anyway, it's got a great summary of like all of Shakespeare's plays, the cast, like the cast of characters. It goes act by act, and then it has a page or two about sort of analysis and how the play has lived, how it has evolved over time. And reading all that about Othello was really revealing. Give me a moment to get to it. And I could start making all these connections just reading the summary. And see, the great thing about this book is, I'm sorry to Shakespeare fans out there, but I have just never enjoyed reading Shakespeare's plays. I've read multiple in school and growing up, like Julius Caesar was one. And I've tried listening to quite a few of them. At one point, I got the audio versions of all of Shakespeare's plays, and I still have them. But I have yet to really, really get into Shakespeare. But he's so important that, it's kind of like the Iliad and the Odyssey. Whether you like it or not, you have to know it. So this uncorrected proof and this guide of Shakespeare's plays has really been great for me to dive into and start to try to understand all those references, at least on some level. So anyway, diving into this, I thought it was really fascinating that the theme of jealousy is really strong in Season of Migration to the North. There's the themes of jealousy, of African Arab identity when coming into contact with the Europeans. How do Europeans see the other, the Oriental? How does the other see the Europeans? And it goes both ways in this book. That there is an idealizing of both that is kind of represented in the story of Mustafa and the character of Mustafa that may or may not exist. This, I know this video is a really clumsy deep dive, but I'm just kind of, leaving myself breadcrumbs of things that I can come back to this video, because I feel like if I am able to use this reading experience to launch some kind of, podcast or discussion where I can actually deep dive some of these books, then it's like I have this to go back to and kind of look at. But Othello raises more, I quote, Othello raises more questions about race and racism than any of Shakespeare's plays. And it goes into a little bit how it took a long time before black performers could even perform the role, and even as far into the 20th century, a televised version for the BBC directed by Jonathan Miller said that a black actor would mislead the audience into thinking that the play was about blackness instead of jealousy. Like, even in 1981 we're saying crazy stuff like this. Like, and in the play it's quite clear, that this is who Othello is. So it's like, why did this become why was this always such a big deal? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of answers to that, right? But anyway, all of that is definitely, I can connect all of that to this book, and it's about a lot more than identity, though. It's about a lot more than racial or ethnic identity and idealizing the other, although those are main themes. It also gets into some things like pretty deep into just the human experience, and gets at sort of like some raw experiences of the moment, of nature, of sensations, of just what it's like to be in a certain place at a certain time. There were even moments that that reminded me strangely of Cormac McCarthy. I don't know why. I have no idea why. It's just something I thought while I was particularly re-listening to the book. So I forgot if I said I read it yesterday and then listened to it while working today. It's also about the sort of, I guess, human weakness, not weakness, but just sort of the way we are, we have kind of a primal nature. And not only do and we're not only talking about like just the basics, food, water, sex, whatever. There is this primal nature of experience that we seek. And this actually I can almost connect to the big temporary migration today of the solar eclipse. Why do people go to see travel miles and miles and miles to see a total solar eclipse? We seek and we crave experience, not necessarily to build something or to create something, but just these transcendent experiences. And a lot of this book is about seeking those transcendent experiences through sexual encounters, not only of a sexual nature, but also tied into this sort of like idealism of Orientalism, or an idealism of how the Sudanese maybe see the British or the Europeans. So it's there's this idea of that we as people are just drawn toward experience, and there's even in Thomas Mann, along with another a lot of authors are mentioned toward the back end of this book in a very particular way that I'm not going to talk about it exactly, but it's toward the end of the book, and they're all kind of listed in a way that's like, I don't know, the Sudanese narrator, the man just looking at all these authors on a shelf, and just these aren't us, these aren't me. But plenty of the book digs at the human experience underneath all of this that's beyond the identities. And Thomas Mann in The Magic Mountain, a very powerful and famous, I don't know if it's a famous quote, but it's one that really stayed in my head, is when Claudia says to Hans that one day, you, the German people, seek experience above all else. You seek an experience, and it's not just the German people, but I'll get into that when I talk about The Magic Mountain more. Someday I'll do a longer video on that, but it's the seeking of experience, and that will make you, and she says to Hans, that will make you one day, your people, the enemy of mankind, or of the entire earth. And that's kind of, it's something like that. That's paraphrased. But that sentiment, that idea that it's not just, science or over-reasoning our world, technology, religion, whatever, that drives us to do crazy things. It's the seeking of experience. And that's, I guess, kind of the angle that this book really brought out in a way that no other has. There's a lot of really incredible moments there that are very kind of surreal, but also realist. But the one that I'm thinking of in particular is our narrator is just kind of riding along, and he sees some, I don't know if it's military or police people stopped. Their car's broken down, I think it was, and then he gets out, and then more people start stopping, and then it just turns into this big caravan party type of thing where everybody's celebrating, and there's these poetic descriptions and my mind is just all over the place with this book, but this book is really all over the place, and it's just constantly, this book just constantly surprised me at every turn. Still, all that being said, there's something about it that it just like, it's still not a book that like I feel like, oh, this is one of my favorite books ever, even though I really, really loved it. I don't know, I'm still hesitating about something, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's just the premise or the characters didn't grab me a lot, but there's something I'm hesitating, and I don't know why, about saying like, whoa, I was just really in love with this book. But it's one that I'm almost certain I'm going to read again, and that I'm so curious about why I'm hesitant, feeling this hesitancy, but also that I loved it so much at the same time, that that really makes me want to go back. And I think it just, it just has a very cutting view of reality. And I think I used that word in my last video too, but it's like, it's got just this really kind of hard-edged view of reality, while at the same time being quite surreal. Very hard-edged view about human nature, and one of the great things that, like, the introduction by Leila Lalami, who's a pretty well-known Moorish author, one thing she points out is that Islam is represented in this book. The people that are Islamic are represented kind of just, they're not represented as completely dominated by their religion. I mean, there's sin and error, and there's negotiation with the religion. They're not presented in caricaturized fashion, and I think that's kind of at the bottom of it. What this book does so well is that it frames the caricatures into one kind of really weird story, really weird character, Mustafa, and then the rest of the book is just kind of filled with the sort of complex lives of the village that's going on, and just the beautiful descriptions and sort of strange moments that I've kind of mentioned. I don't know. I still don't really know. I still don't really know what to make of it. I said that about the last book too, and a lot of books in this project really kind of fall into that. But yeah, totally a worthwhile read. Season of Migration to the North. This video is totally all over the place. I know it, but that's what's kind of fun sometimes, and I hope will be fun for me to look back on these and get a lot of ideas going forward with, I don't know, what am I even trying to do here reading the world? What am I aiming for? I don't know. I would assume, I think trying to create some more, I don't know, connect the dots a little bit, find common themes where I can, discuss a whole number of books around a certain theme, and sort of see how this is something that we can find all around the world and in literature, and that there are unifying threads throughout all of world literature, but there are also kind of blind spots. For example, that especially in a world literature project like this, there's going to be a leaning toward the upper class, especially coming from a lot of countries where most people are not in the upper class. But who gets published? Who gets translated? Most of the voices in English that we end up hearing and maybe literature has always been that way. Literature has always been a upper middle, upper class thing. I don't know. That's another point of discussion, and one that isn't too far off from this book. There's certainly some really interesting investigations into, I don't know so much class, but how do sort of the Sudanese people of this town or village see our narrator, even though even though they haven't had all the opportunities that he's had to go abroad and things, and what do they think of him, and what does he think that they think of him? I think a lot of this book, as many of these homecoming novels sort of are often more of a reflection of the author's insecurities. That's not a bad thing. It's just kind of part of that nature of literature, and that so many are from people that have gone abroad or are from the upper class, and they are trying to represent their country but aren't actually they're not as connected to their country as they think they should be. And none of this is I'm not trying to just conjecture this stuff. This is what I feel I'm learning by reading a lot of these books. So I don't know if any of these are controversial statements. I'm kind of just throwing them out. Feel free to criticize. That's how I learn. Feel free to argue a different point or whatever. I'm not here to get offended. I'm here to learn. So appreciate any comments whatsoever. So, and last thing, I am, as on the topic of listening to comments, I'm trying to improve the audio quality by actually buying a little microphone that I have clipped to my vest here. So that's the first official investment, as well as a tripod here for my camera. Up until now, I haven't had a microphone or a tripod, but I figure if I'm making hundreds of videos about books, good God, I might as well start trying to improve the quality a little bit, right? Yeah, now I just need lighting, a nice haircut and a shave maybe, and a better camera, better phone, I don't know, whatever. All right, thanks for watching. That was Season of Migration to the North by Tayeb, Salih. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'm not sure what the next book will be, but it'll be a good one, I'm sure. I'm reading a few really good ones right now. So have a great day, and I hope you were able to enjoy the eclipse if you were in the United States. Bye.